My brother-in-law, who married my sister, told my wife that he was in love with her. This led to a chain of horrific discoveries in our family. Yesterday, out of the blue, my brother-in-law asked my wife if she could meet him for lunch. He said there was something he needed to talk to her about. When my wife told me about his invitation, she seemed puzzled but not overly concerned. "Do you think it's about my sister?" she asked, furrowing her brow. "Maybe they're having problems, and he wants to get a woman's perspective on things." I found the whole situation odd. My brother-in-law had never reached out to my wife in this way before, but he often texted her and other family members for mundane reasons. So I didn't think much of it. After all, we were a close-knit family, and it wasn't unusual for us to support each other through tough times. "Go find out," I told her. Shrugging off my initial unease, my wife agreed, deciding to meet him at a cafe near her office the next day. The next morning, as she was getting ready for work, she mentioned lunch again. "I'm still not sure what this is about," she said, a hint of worrying in her voice. I reassured her, saying, "It's probably nothing serious. Just listen to what he has to say, and if it's something we need to help with, we'll figure it out together." It's a busy cafe, filled with the usual lunchtime crowd, and my wife feels a bit more at ease being in such a public setting. She arrives a bit early, finding a table near the window where she can keep an eye on the entrance. He arrives a few minutes later, looking more nervous than she's ever seen him. They exchange the usual pleasantries, talking about work and the kids for a few minutes, but then, as soon as their food arrives, he takes a deep breath and dives into what he really came to say. He starts by complimenting her, telling her how beautiful she looks. At first, she thinks he's just being polite, but then he keeps going. He tells her how she's always been the light in his life, how she makes him feel things he's never felt before. "It was love at first sight," he says, his voice trembling slightly. "I've loved you since the moment I first laid eyes on you. If you were mine, I would treat you like the queen you are. I'd give you everything you deserve." My wife is stunned. She stares at him, unable to believe what she's hearing. This man, my brother-in-law, married to my sister and father of their 2 kids, is pouring his heart out to her. He lays it on thick, making grand promises about how different life would be if they were together. He goes on, saying how he's been holding these feelings in for years, how he's watched her and admired her from afar, feeling more and more that they're meant to be together. She tries to interrupt, to tell him he's making a huge mistake, but he keeps talking over her, almost as if he's rehearsed this speech 1,000 times in his head. Mind you, this man has always had a friendly relationship with my wife. Our family sees each other often since we're a close-knit bunch. He's always been the fun uncle to our kids, the guy who's there at every family barbecue, every holiday dinner. He does text my wife frequently, but it's always been about mundane things, the kids' schedules, family events, things like that. Nothing overly sexual, nothing that would set off any alarms. In fact, he texts and calls my mom too. They have a friendly rapport, and none of us ever thought anything of it. To us, he's always been just a good guy, someone we trust implicitly. So, to hear my wife recount this to me is like a punch to the gut. My wife doesn't let him finish. She stands up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and walks out. She's shaking as she calls me, telling me everything that just happened. While she's on the phone with me, the texts from him start. First, it's apologies. He didn't mean it. He thinks it's only infatuation. He's sorry for making her uncomfortable, but the damage is done. She leaves work early to come home and talk to me about this, her phone buzzing incessantly with his calls and messages. I tell her to answer one of his calls, to put him on speaker so I can hear. He's crying, begging her not to tell my sister. He keeps saying it was a mistake, that he misread signals, that he thought she felt the same way. Apparently, when we were together this past weekend, he thought my wife was flirting with him, that they had a moment alone in our kitchen where he felt a connection. My wife is a major ball buster, and I suppose I can see how that can be taken as flirting. But this is beyond anything we could have imagined. He asks if she told me, and I answer, yes, as I'm on speaker. Then he starts begging me to, pleading for us to keep this a secret. This went on for a while, him begging and us listening. My main question was whether he had cheated on my sister before. He swore he hadn't, swearing on his kids' lives that it was just my wife. He said I should understand that it was her, only her. At that point, I was done listening. I told him I wasn't going to do anything tonight and that I'd call him tomorrow. Now we're left with this mess, not knowing what to do next. My wife says we should drive over there right now and tell my sister. But the idea of wrecking my sister's family is killing me. Thinking about what this will do to my nieces makes me want to vomit. I know the right thing to do is to tell my sister, but I'm also thinking about my wife. It's not her fault, but there's sure to be resentment from my family. Even if my sister doesn't divorce him and they reconcile, I can't see how we'll ever be together again like we were before, if at all. This whole episode can tear my family apart. I don't give a damn about him. He tried to destroy my family. But I do care about everyone else. Update. So, everyone that told me last night that I couldn't wait to tell my sister was right. A little after 12, I got a call from my sister. She sounded upset and said she had to tell me something. My heart sank as she explained that her husband, my brother-in-law, had come to her in tears, claiming my wife had tried to begin an affair with him. He spun a tale where my wife was the instigator, trying to shift the blame entirely onto her. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I immediately told my sister that wasn't the case and assured her I would be right over. This situation needed to be addressed face-to-face, not over the phone. I hung up and, with a sense of urgency, called my parents. I woke my mother and father, explaining what was happening in quick, clipped sentences. My father was furious. My mother sounded shocked, but resolute. They agreed to head over to my sister's house to sit with her kids, offering the support she would desperately need right now. Next, I called my younger brother. He gradually answered, confusion turning to alarm as I filled him in. He promised to come over to our place and stay with our kids, ensuring they wouldn't be left alone during this turmoil. His calm, steady presence would be a comfort to them. Meanwhile, my wife was already gathering her things, her face pale and drawn. She was dreading the confrontation, but knew it was necessary. We left the house in a hurry, the drive to my sister's place feeling longer than it actually was. The silence in the car was heavy, both of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, the scene was even more tense than I had imagined. My sister is out on the front porch with my brother-in-law when we get there. He looks beaten, eyes downcast, his posture slumped in defeat. He knows we have the texts and voicemails, the undeniable proof of his betrayal. I really don't know what he was hoping to accomplish by calling my sister in the middle of the night with his lies. Maybe he thought he could get ahead of the story, twist the narrative to save himself, but it was a futile effort. As we walk up to them, the tension in the air is palpable. My wife is trembling, her face a mask of controlled anger and hurt. She hands my sister her phone without a word. My sister takes it, her hands steady, but her eyes burning with a mix of fury and pain. She scrolls through the texts, her expression hardening with each one she reads. Then she listens to the voicemails, the damning evidence of his declarations and her refusals. Before she can say anything, my brother-in-law starts sobbing. This is a man who runs into burning buildings, who faces danger daily without flinching. Seeing him like this, broken and vulnerable, is jarring. His cries are deep and guttural, raw with regret and fear. It's a scene that's almost surreal. A big, tough firefighter brought to his knees by his own actions. My sister's face remains impassive, a mask of stern resolve. She's always been tough, but right now, she's unyielding. She waits for him to finish, her silence more powerful than any words. When he finally quiets down, still hiccuping with the remnants of his sobs, she speaks. "Pack a bag and go," she says, her voice cold and clear. I can't stand to look at you. He tries to argue, to plead his case, but she's having none of it. Stop it, she snaps, cutting through his words. There's nothing you can say that will make this better. She turns away from him, walks over to my wife, and pulls her into a hug. It's a moment of solidarity between them, a small comfort in the middle of this nightmare. They've been friends since college, and the strength of their bond is evident. It's a relief to see that despite everything, they're standing together. This leaves me standing with my brother-in-law. He's a wreck, his face red and swollen from crying, his shoulders slumped. He looks at me, his eyes pleading for some kind of understanding or forgiveness, but I have none to offer. He tries to speak, his voice cracking, but I cut him off. You need to leave, I say firmly. This is your mess. You need to deal with the consequences. He nods, defeated, and slowly makes his way inside to pack his things. My sister stays with my wife, the two of them talking quietly, leaning on each other for support. The rest of the night is a blur of conversations and plans. We all rally around my sister, helping her figure out what to do next, how to protect her kids from the fallout. My sister begins questioning my wife, trying to understand why her husband thought any of this could possibly work out. He must have had some reason to believe she reciprocated his feelings. My sister insists that there hadn't been any issues in their marriage, everything had been normal. My wife is crying at this point, tears streaming on her face as she tries to make sense of the situation. There's nothing you haven't seen, she says, her voice shaking. She hands my sister her phone again, and together they painstakingly go through every text message sent over the past 2 years. They read each one carefully, looking for any hint of inappropriate behavior. But there's nothing there. My wife was just being herself. She has a playful personality, always joking around and teasing. It's part of what makes her so lovable and approachable. My brother-in-law has a similar sense of humor, and they've always teased each other in a light-hearted, harmless way. She does the same with my mom and my younger brother. It's just how she interacts with people. The only incident my wife can think of that might have been misconstrued happened this past weekend. She recounts it, trying to pinpoint where things went wrong. They were all together at our place, and she and my brother-in-law both reached for the fridge at the same time. They playfully jostled for who would get there first, laughing as they did so. He let her win, but then he reached around her waist to grab a beer, moving his hand slowly. She admits that in that moment, the way he did it felt a little inappropriate. It was a fleeting feeling, and she brushed it off, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. She wonders now if her silence gave him some misguided hope. My sister listens, her expression softening. She doesn't blame my wife for any of this. She knows her well enough to understand that her playful nature isn't an invitation for anything more. It's not your fault, she reassures her, and my wife nods, though the guilt still lingers. As they finish reading through the messages, it's clear there was never any mutual attraction, no hidden signals or secret flirtations. My wife was just being herself, and my brother-in-law took that and twisted it into something it wasn't. The realization that this misunderstanding has caused so much pain is almost too much to bear, but at least, for now, my sister's belief in my wife remains intact. So then my sister starts going through his MacBook to see what else she doesn't know about. She's angry and frantic at this point, her hands shaking as she types. She guesses the password, and on the third try, she's in. With a deep breath, she starts searching through his files, looking for anything that might shed more light on this nightmare. It doesn't take long before she finds something disturbing. There, buried in a folder labeled innocuously, are a lot of pictures of my wife. They date back years. What's more unsettling is that they're always isolated shots, just her. Never in group settings or candid family moments. My sister clicks through them, her anger turning into a cold, creeping horror. One set of photos stands out. A few years ago, we went on a couple's trip to the Caribbean. It was a rare vacation without the kids, and my wife, feeling more relaxed in the adults-only environment, had worn a bikini. She usually doesn't, preferring more modest swimwear, but this time she had felt comfortable enough to do so. There were probably 50 pictures of her in that bikini, each one taken without her knowledge. My sister's face pales as she scrolls through them. It's clear he's been secretly snapping these photos for years, collecting them obsessively. The realization that he's been harboring this fixation, lurking in the shadows of family events, sends a shiver down her spine. Does this now enter restraining order territory? She wonders aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. This has taken a creepy turn far beyond what any of us had imagined. The boundary between inappropriate and outright disturbing has been crossed. She calls us over, showing us the pictures. My wife gasps, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. She had no idea he was doing this, no inkling of his obsession. My sister, her anger now tempered by a deep sense of betrayal, starts talking about next steps, legal action, protection for her kids, and a restraining order, all possibilities that need to be considered. Now, we're all reeling from this new discovery. The man we thought we knew, who we trusted as a husband, a father, and a brother-in-law, has shown a side of himself that's dark and disturbing. It's not just a matter of infatuation anymore. It's something far more insidious. Unfortunately, the mess continues. My sister agreed to talk to her husband last night and let him explain himself. She was determined to get the full story and decided to involve my wife directly to ensure there would be no lying or half-truths. They set up a FaceTime call with my wife, and I listened in off-camera, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and dread. My sister, ever thorough, recorded the entire conversation for good measure. As soon as the call began, the tension was palpable. My brother-in-law looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying. He started hesitantly, his voice shaky, but as he spoke, the truth began to pour out, and the story unfolded in a way none of us had fully anticipated. He admitted, "I've been obsessed with my wife for years. It started the day I met her," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. He went on to explain that it was during one of those early gatherings where my sister, eager to introduce her new boyfriend to her friends, had brought him along. My wife and I were dating at the time, but he had met her before he met me. At first, he thought his feelings were purely physical, an innocent crush that he could brush aside. But as time went on and he spent more time around her, he realized it was more than that. He became fixated on her personality, her laughter, the way she interacted with everyone around her. He described moments where he found himself watching her, captivated by her presence, even as she was just being herself, playful and kind. He detailed how he had tried to suppress these feelings, convincing himself that they were harmless, but over time, his obsession grew. He started finding ways to be near her more often, volunteering to help with family events, making excuses to text her about trivial things. It was a slow, insidious process that eventually led to the point where he felt compelled to confess his feelings, deluding himself into believing she might feel the same way. My sister listened, her face a mask of controlled rage and heartbreak. She didn't interrupt him, letting him dig his own grave with each word. My wife, on the other hand, was visibly shaken. Hearing how long this had been going on, how deeply his obsession ran, was almost too much for her to bear. When he finished, there was a heavy silence. My sister finally spoke, her voice icy and measured. "What made you think that my wife would leave me for you?" she asked, her eyes boring into his. He stammered, struggling to find the right words. He mentioned the supposed mutual attraction, the moments he had misinterpreted as signs of her reciprocation. My wife and sister exploded at that point, their pent-up anger and frustration spilling over. There was a lot of cussing, a lot of screaming, the raw emotion of betrayal and hurt coming to the forefront. My wife hung up the call, her hands trembling, her face pale. She was concerned for me, for us, assuring me repeatedly that the attraction was one-sided. I believed her. I always had. Even if she did find him physically attractive at some point, I knew she would never act on it. She's serious about trust and fidelity, something she made clear early on in our relationship. This whole ordeal was a twisted fantasy of my brother-in-law's, a dangerous delusion that had nearly torn our family apart. The tension that had been building up during the call finally erupted into a storm of cussing and screaming. My wife's voice was a mix of fury and hurt, while my sister's was steely and unforgiving. The barrage of emotions was overwhelming, the air thick with betrayal and disbelief. The phone call abruptly ended when my wife, shaking and distraught, hung up because she was concerned for me. She turned to me, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. It was one-sided. She assured me, her voice trembling. "I never thought it wasn't," I replied, trying to soothe her. Even if she did find him physically attractive at some point, I knew she would never act on it. She's just not that type of person. Early on in our relationship, there was a moment that encapsulated her stance on trust and fidelity perfectly. I remember watching her one morning as she was dressing, admiring her without saying a word. She noticed, gave me a teasing smile, and asked if I liked what I saw. But then her expression turned serious, almost cold. "Never," she said, her tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. "Or you'll never see this again." She meant every word. My wife is serious about trust. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to mend. As I sat there, replaying the chaotic scene in my mind, I couldn't help but reflect on my brother-in-law. I knew he was a little cocky, always walking with a certain swagger, but my God, I never knew he thought so highly of himself to believe he could pull off something like this. His delusions of grandeur were staggering, completely detached from reality. I talked to my sister later on, once the initial shock had started to wear off and we could speak more calmly. She was resolute, determined to protect her children from the fallout of her husband's actions. She told me she would be contacting a lawyer first thing Monday morning to see what steps she could take to limit his exposure to their kids. She wanted to ensure that they were shielded from as much of this mess as possible. "As far as I'm concerned, he's detached from reality," she said, her voice steely with resolve. Her concern was no longer about saving her marriage, but about safeguarding her children and maintaining a semblance of stability for them. Anyway, my brother-in-law returned home yesterday, not because my sister wants him back, but because she can't legally stop him. Despite the turmoil and the clear betrayal, he has the right to be in the house until the legal proceedings move forward. The atmosphere is tense and uncomfortable, filled with unspoken words and palpable resentment. They are done, and I think he realizes that now. There's a hollow look in his eyes, as if he understands that any hope he had of salvaging their marriage is gone. The lawyer tells my sister that since my brother-in-law's behavior over the past few days has been documented, there is a good chance she will be granted full custody of the kids. The texts, voicemails, and the disturbing cache of photos all paint a clear picture of his obsession and instability. He doesn't seem to even want to fight her on that. It's as if he knows he's lost everything and is too weary to put up a battle. My sister will be fine. She's stronger than she looks, and any love she had for him is gone. She moves through the house with a determined air, her focus now entirely on her children and their future. She doesn't seem to be broken up about it. Rather, she looks like someone who's finally seen the truth and is ready to move forward. The kids don't know what happened yet. They sense something is wrong. Kids always do, but they don't know the details. My brother-in-law was never around much anyway. When the kids were home, he often slept at the fire station, pulling double shifts and overtime. His absence was a constant in their lives, a silent but ever-present gap that they had grown used to. But it is certain to be hard on them once they know what's going to happen. The stability of their home, the presence of both parents, even if it was fractured, will change. My sister is prepared for this. She's already spoken to a child psychologist to help them navigate the inevitable questions and emotions that will arise. She's ready to be both mother and father, to provide them with the love and support they'll need. As for my brother-in-law, he stays in the guest room, a silent figure in a house that no longer feels like his home. He seems resigned to his fate, going through the motions, but devoid of any real fight. It's a sad, pitiful sight. But my sympathy is limited. Some of my friends have said that there must be more women, that someone as obsessive as my brother-in-law couldn't have fixated on just one person. But as far as we can tell, there hasn't been anyone else. It's really just the obsession with my wife. His fixation on her has been singular and intense, leaving no room for anyone else. After everything came to light, my wife blocked his phone number, trying to create some distance and protect herself from his unwanted advances. But on the same night, he returned home. He sent my wife an email from an account he had just made. It started with a seemingly sincere apology, but it quickly took a turn into something much darker. He began by saying he never got to finish at the restaurant that day, implying there was more he needed to confess. Then he launched into paragraphs and paragraphs about all the things he loves about my wife. He detailed the desperation he felt, the overwhelming emotions that had driven him to act so irrationally. He recounted every little detail he admired about her, her smile, her laugh, the way she interacted with others. It was unsettling, to say the least, to see his obsession laid out so starkly. He mentioned their supposed mutual attraction again, insisting that there was a palpable sexual tension between them that he had always felt. He was delusional, mistaking her friendly, playful nature for something more. He painted a picture of a connection that existed only in his mind, a fantasy that he had convinced himself was real. The email ended with a rather large section about me. Let's just say I didn't know he had such a low opinion of me. He was quite certain that I was not satisfying my wife properly. He criticized everything from my appearance to my demeanor, implying that I was somehow unworthy of her. His words were meant to undermine me, to sow seeds of doubt and insecurity. Reading the email was a gut punch. It was clear that his obsession with my wife had twisted his perceptions and fueled his disdain for me. He saw me as an obstacle, someone unworthy of the woman he had placed on a pedestal. But instead of feeling threatened, it only solidified my resolve to protect my wife and my family from his delusions. We forwarded the email to my sister and her lawyer. It was more evidence of his unstable state of mind, another piece of the puzzle that showed just how far gone he was. This email, with its mix of apology, obsession, and vitriol, might be enough to get him removed from the house permanently. For now, my wife and I are taking it one day at a time. The support from our friends and family has been invaluable, helping us navigate this surreal and painful situation. Finally, my wife isn't doing great, but she is improving each day. She does feel guilty for being too comfortable around my brother-in-law. Normally, she is very careful about setting boundaries with other men. In case it wasn't clear, my wife is quite stunning and receives a lot of male attention. However, she felt safe around my brother-in-law because he was family, and she never thought he would cross any lines. Fortunately, she and my sister are on good terms, and there doesn't seem to be any resentment, which is a relief. We will all be okay, but it will take time. Thank you to everyone who commented and offered their support. My primary concern throughout this was my sister and her children. The impact of my brother-in-law's actions on their lives is immense. Ensuring their protection and emotional well-being became our priority. Children, especially, need shielding from such toxic situations to maintain their sense of security and normalcy. When faced with such a situation, it's essential to act quickly and decisively. We didn't hesitate to gather evidence, confront the issue, and involve legal help to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone involved. Procrastination or denial could have led to further harm. What do you think about this story? Please share your comments down below. Thank you for listening to Vibe Tales. I turned down my ex's attempt to partner in my new restaurant as she sabotaged our first business and shattered my trust. I, 3-M, and my ex-fiancée Veronica, 31F, had a food truck together. We both dreamed of having our own restaurant when we first met 3 years ago while attending culinary school. While I had been working in kitchens since I was 16 to support myself, Veronica, who hailed from an affluent family, had never worked in the culinary sector prior to attending school. Despite our disparate upbringings, we clicked away when we first started the business. We were engaged for 2 years and dated for 6. Since I graduated, I had been saving money by working 60-hour weeks at different restaurants to accumulate cash and experience. By my 29th birthday, I had saved about $100,000. Veronica persuaded me to start with a food truck instead of continuing to save money until I could create a real restaurant. Before spending money on a complete restaurant, she suggested it would be the ideal opportunity to test our concept and develop our brand. My entire concept and idea for the food truck came from me by fusing contemporary cooking methods with my grandmother's traditional recipes. I wanted to serve fusion cuisine. Even though Veronica didn't contribute any money, I decided to make her a 50-50 partner because she looked pleased about it, and we were engaged and hoping to get married within the year. I oversaw operations and cooking, while she handled all financial matters because she had accounting knowledge from a prior position. The first year was fantastic. We discovered the ideal location next to a few office buildings, and our food was well liked by frequent patrons. We were found by local food bloggers who gave us excellent evaluations. We even made the list of the top 10 food trucks in our city. I felt like I had finally realized my dream after our accomplishment, and it was even more satisfying to do it alongside Veronica. However, after 14 months, things began to become strange. I started to see inconsistencies in our inventories based on our sales. Supplies would run out sooner than they ought to. Veronica indicated that we might be squandering more food than we thought, or that some staff might be stealing. When I brought this up to her, since she was in charge of the books, I trusted her judgment. After that, I saw that funds appeared to be vanishing from our account. Despite making a healthy profit, we never appeared to have enough money for necessities. Veronica would become defensive and accuse me of not trusting her. "Do you think I'm stealing from us? Or don't you trust your future wife?" are some of the things she would say. I felt bad for even asking because of her. When one of our suppliers called to inform us that we were 3 months late on our payments, it was the tipping point. I knew we had enough revenue to support our costs, so this was illogical. I checked our business account online while Veronica was asleep. I felt ill to my stomach after discovering what I did. Veronica had been regularly moving money, often thousands of dollars at a time, from our corporate account to her personal account. The following morning, when I confronted her, she sobbed and acknowledged that she had been stealing money for months. She stated that she needed money to support Andrea, to 5F, her younger sister, who was allegedly having a lot of credit card debt and didn't want their parents to find out. I tried to be understanding, even though I was upset. Andrea, who occasionally assisted us with the food truck, was also like a sister to me. It was unbelievable to me that she was in such difficulties and hadn't approached us immediately in order to discuss the matter and determine how we could assist Andrea in managing her debt. I gave her a call. However, Andrea was utterly perplexed. She said that she had no debt and that Veronica had not given her any money. Actually, she was doing very well financially and had recently received a promotion at work. Andrea was astonished when I informed her of Veronica's justification for the missing funds. Over the course of 8 months, it was discovered that Veronica had stolen about $50,000 from our company. The complex lies she had said and the way she had exploited her own sister as a cover story were more significant than the money. Her tale altered when I approached her once more. She said she wanted to surprise me and that she had been saving the money for our wedding and a down payment on a home. She had been taking out cash at ATMs, according to bank records, but the money was nowhere to be located. I promptly called off our engagement. Veronica sobbed uncontrollably, alternating between pleading for my pardon and claiming that I was exaggerating. Her parents became involved, which made matters worse. They maintained that since we were engaged and would shortly get married, it wasn't actually theft. Her father even implied that my tight control over the company funds amounted to financial abuse. In order to settle our supplier bills, I had to sell the food truck. I lost nearly everything I had accumulated because of the stolen money and the depreciated worth of a used food truck. I almost went bankrupt and was horrified. According to Veronica's parents, it was only a little financial dispute that I had exaggerated. Even some of our mutual acquaintances said I should try to make amends with her since I was being too harsh. After working at several jobs for 2 years and saving every penny, I eventually launched my own tiny restaurant 6 months ago. It's nothing special, but I own it and have total authority over it. I maintain thorough records of everything and engaged qualified accountants. The restaurant is thriving. We're already making money and receiving positive feedback. Veronica arrived during dinner service last week. She claimed to want to put things right after learning about my achievement from friends we shared in common. She said she had changed and had some money to invest, so she proposed to be partners once more. She mentioned how effectively we collaborated before the problem and suggested that we work together to further the restaurant's success. She has persisted even after I urged her to leave. After laughing incredulously, her parents began phoning me, accusing me of being spiteful and urging me to give Veronica another chance because she was essentially family. They mentioned how she had assisted me in launching my first company and claimed that I owed her for that. I blocked their phone numbers on social media. Veronica's pals are now disparaging me and accusing me of being callous for failing to assist my ex's family and getting back on their feet, since everyone deserves a second opportunity. Several mutual friends claim that I'm being too harsh and that I should at least listen to her. Update: 3 weeks have passed since my last post. Thank you to everyone who left a comment and offered encouragement. I need to get this off my chest since, regrettably, things have become much worse. Veronica and her parents started visiting my restaurant during our busiest times. After I blocked them initially, Veronica was the only one ordering water. While seated alone at a corner table, she would remain for hours, looking at me every time I went by. Some clients observed the tension, and my employees began to feel uneasy. Her parents then joined in. They would only order the cheapest items on the menu and occupy a large table that could seat 6 people during our Friday and Saturday dinner rush. They would try to wave me down every time I passed, screaming things like, "This is no way to treat your future in-laws," or "We're family, you can't ignore us forever," loud enough for the customers around to hear. At first, I made an effort to manage things professionally. My host seated them in less conspicuous locations and told the employees to handle them, just like any other patron. However, they went too far. Last week, during dinner service, Veronica's father got up and began yelling at other patrons about how I had taken their daughter's business ideas and left her when she needed assistance. There was a commotion when I had to ask them to leave. Only after I threatened to call the police did they go. The following day, I began to see odd internet evaluations. Someone had set up several accounts to submit unfavorable evaluations about my restaurant. They said we served bad food, had rats in the kitchen, and had major health code breaches. The fact that certain reviews brought up particular instances from our food truck days, such as the time we had to close early due to a generator failure, and that she twisted it into a tale about food contamination, was what gave Veronica away. My business began to suffer from the phony reviews. Our lunch attendance significantly shrank, and I experienced multiple cancellations of reservations. Veronica was served with a cease and desist letter by the lawyer I hired, who specialized in defamation matters. In response, she posted on many sites and made more fictitious accounts. At that moment, an unforeseen event occurred. Veronica's sister, Andrea, visited my restaurant after it had closed. She claimed she was unable to remain silent any longer and was clearly agitated. She disclosed that Veronica never provided assistance to anyone using the pilfered funds. She had been concealing her gambling addiction for years. Andrea claims that before we even met, Veronica had been going to underground casinos. Although she was able to conceal it effectively, her losses had been increasing. She immediately used the $50 zero she took from our food truck business to settle debts related to gambling 2 years prior. When Andrea found Veronica unconscious in her apartment with threatening messages from loan sharks on her phone, she had learned of this. Andrea proved everything to me with pictures, text messages, and bank statements. Veronica has been controlling everyone in her vicinity. She had even convinced their parents that she needed the money for our wedding preparations, so she had stolen it. She had previously gambled away her savings, which is why she hadn't contributed any funds to our food truck. It was troubling why Andrea hadn't stepped out sooner. She had been blackmailed by Veronica, although their conservative parents were unaware of it. Andrea was seeing a lady. If Andrea ever told their parents the truth about the gambling, Veronica had vowed to expose her. When Andrea realized that Veronica's behavior was ruining my new company, she eventually made the decision to notify me. Since she could no longer bear the guilt, I informed our common acquaintances, who had been disparaging me on social media, of this knowledge. Many expressed shock and apologies for making assumptions about me before hearing the whole tale. Many recalled giving Veronica loans that she never paid back, constantly citing various justifications, such as unexpected costs. Veronica's parents, meanwhile, continued to live in denial. They accused Andrea of lying to conceal her own lifestyle choices. When she attempted to provide proof of Veronica's gaming, they are now accusing me of being cruel for disseminating false information about Veronica's alleged addiction and of manipulating Andrea into turning against her sister. When some of Veronica's contacts from the casino began to visit my restaurant, the situation became even more difficult. They weren't subtle individuals, and other patrons felt uneasy around them. One of them cornered me in the parking lot after closing last week and said I ought to be more giving to my ex-fiancé to keep an eye on the property during business hours. I had to hire a security guard because of all this commotion. My business is getting hurt. I've had to pay for security and legal fees, and our weekday dinner service has decreased by 30%. However, I'm not going to back down. We are getting ready to file a lawsuit against Veronica and anyone else attempting to harm my company. My lawyer is compiling proof of harassment and defamation. I know that giving Veronica money will just make her conduct worse. Yet some people have urged that I do so to make this stop. Instead of supporting her and making excuses for her behavior, she needs professional therapy for her gambling addiction. Part of the reason I'm giving this update is to alert others to the ways addiction may lead to manipulation and harm to those closest to the addict. I'm concentrating on safeguarding my company and my staff for the time being. I've started recording every event and added more security cameras. I've also warned other local business owners about the possibility of harassment. My true friends have come to light as a result of this circumstance, and I'm appreciative to those who have supported me during this chaos. Update 2. 2 months have passed since my last update, and what I have in store for you feels like something from a horrible movie. A man named Michael, 35 meters, entered my restaurant during prep time and asked to speak with me alone. Just when I believed I had exposed all of Veronica's lies, he identified himself as the current legal husband of Veronica, not her ex-husband. I initially believed that this was just another effort at harassment, but Michael had data to support my claims. He gave me their 7-year-old marriage certificate, pictures from their wedding, and court documents detailing his efforts to find Veronica 5 years ago after she vanished with their money. Since Veronica had never formally divorced him, our engagement was a sham. Michael told his story over lunch. He married young after being in love with Veronica in high school. They opened a tiny bakery in a different state with their wedding funds and a loan from his parents. Does that sound familiar? Veronica maxed out their credit cards, cleared out their accounts, and disappeared after 2 years of what appeared to be a prosperous business. She only left a note expressing her sense of being stuck in the marriage. In addition to the divorce, Michael spent years trying to find her because she had ruined his family. In order to repay the company loans they co-signed, his parents had to sell their home. The time was ideal 3 months before she met me at culinary school. Veronica vanished from Michael's life when I brought up the topic of actually choosing a wedding date. She always had an excuse since she had changed her last name but had never formally divorced him. Michael's story made me feel physically ill. Veronica wasn't being sentimental or pragmatic when she recommended that we elope or expressed a desire for a small private wedding ceremony. Legally, she was unable to wed me. She had previously stolen money from our food truck business, but this was her most recent theft. Surprisingly, Veronica revealed everything when I texted her to confront her about Michael, but she twisted the story as Veronica always does. She said Michael had been abusive and domineering. Michael, however, showed me police records he had submitted, which demonstrated that she was the one who was abusing him and that she had to steal the money in order to get away. Veronica said that she had intended to divorce Michael in the end and that she had kept her marriage a secret from me out of protection. After hours of note comparing, Michael and I discovered that Veronica had been operating the same fraud in several places. She would connect with someone who wanted to launch a food-related business, get access to their money, and then drain their accounts. As far as we know, she had done this at least 4 times. Together with Michael's attorney, my attorney is currently constructing a fraud case against Veronica. At last, Michael is able to her with divorce documents. The fact that this seems to be a pattern of intentional illegal activity across several states is another reason why the authorities are interested. When further victims began contacting us, it was the biggest shock. Michael published my original Reddit post in forums for company owners. After discovering it, 3 other individuals came forward with comparable accounts of Veronica. Even while she was still living with Michael, she was engaged to one. Every story had the same pattern. She would become part of their life, win their trust by falling in love, and then take whatever she could. When Veronica's parents found out about her prior marriage, they eventually stopped supporting her. When her mother arrived at my restaurant in tears, she said she didn't know who her daughter was. However, they have just vanished without offering me an apology for their harassment and accusations. Andrea claims that in order to settle some of Veronica's gambling debts, they have deactivated their social media accounts, ceased frequenting the restaurant, and mortgaged their home. Since we called the police, the casino staff has also retreated. It turns out that some of them didn't want the spotlight and were operating in illegal gambling enterprises. Veronica owes them more than $200,000. We found out she had been trying to recover her losses by spending the money she had stolen from me and other people, but she had only ended up losing more. At last, things are returning to normal at my restaurant. Regular consumers are coming back now that the phony reviews have been taken down. This strange experience has made me buddies with Michael. He even promised to assist me in growing my company after the legal matters are resolved. He stated that he hopes this entire fiasco would lead to something positive. I'm still amazed at how meticulously Veronica organized everything. She made up whole false personas and life tales, in addition to lying about minor details. Since they discovered anomalies in her application materials, the culinary school where we met is currently looking into the matter. Her entire existence seems to have been based on falsehoods. Update 3. This will most likely be my final update, as it has been 6 months since my last post. Last month, Veronica was taken into custody in Las Vegas. She apparently ran away there after all the information was made public and attempted to con a casino owner with the same RSE. She was obviously unaware that casino owners spoke with one another, and one of them knew who she was from the warnings that had been going around under a different fictitious name. The cops discovered her residing at an inexpensive motel. She had 5 different IDs and credit cards in different names. When she was arrested, notebooks describing her prior scams, including the one she perpetrated on me, were also discovered. She had everything in writing, including when to start collecting money, how to build trust, and how long to wait before proposing a business opportunity. Everything was organized like a business plan. She faces many fraud charges from the district attorney in multiple states. In addition to Michael and me, they discovered at least 7 more victims. While she was still legally married to Michael, she was also engaged to 2 of them. She has taken about $800,000 in total throughout the years. She could face severe jail time. Andrea now frequents my restaurant on a regular basis. She moved in with her girlfriend in a nearby apartment after coming out to her parents and being shunned. Ironically, she now assists me with the books, carrying out the task her sister was meant to perform. In addition to being far more skilled at it, she is also honest. We occasionally discuss Veronica and attempt to determine whether there were any indicators that we overlooked, but our main goal is to move on. Last week, Veronica's parents finally spoke out. They actually sent me a handwritten letter, not a text or email. Although it wasn't quite an apology, I thought it may be. They wrote about how their love for their kid blinded them and how they failed to raise her properly. In order to pay off the obligations Veronica had accrued in their names, they acknowledged having to sell their home and relocate to a smaller space not for their benefit, but so they might have a relationship with their future grandkids, if I ever had any. They asked if I could find it in my heart to forgive them. I didn't answer. There are some issues that cannot be resolved verbally, and I have no desire to keep up any relationship with them. They only expressed regret once they became victims themselves, supported Veronica's actions for years, and attacked my character after I revealed her thievery. In fact, all of this has made Michael and I close friends. He recently launched a new bakery in the community, and we are discussing the possibility of working together on future initiatives. We both concur that we must not allow Veronica's actions to deter us from putting our faith in others and going for our goals. Now, more than ever, my restaurant is doing well. In fact, more customers came in as a result of the attention surrounding Veronica's arrest. In an attempt to torment me, some even want to sit at the famous table where she used to wait for hours. I now make fun of it with my employees, but we've also put strong security measures in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Although the legal proceedings are still going on, I'm not giving them any more attention. I have provided the prosecutors with the required statements and supporting paperwork. I'm done allowing Veronica to occupy space in my life, but her actions will be held against her in court. I occasionally reflect on how things might have gone differently if I had allowed myself to be manipulated by her and given her another chance. Like she did with the food truck, she most likely would have emptied my new restaurant as well. Rather, I followed my gut and refused to back down. I've discovered that getting even or disproving others isn't always the best form of retaliation. It's about turning a bad experience into something good. I've made real friends. My restaurant is doing well, and I'm at last at peace with all that has transpired. For anyone experiencing a similar situation, follow your instincts, document everything, and avoid being coerced into disregarding warning signs. Certain individuals reveal their true selves to you. Trust them the first time. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.